Hello and welcome to this Astronomy Strategic Case Study Examiner's Report Debrief. This is a report that's been published by the Strategic Case Study Examiner recently, just came out in October 2025, and is related to the May and August 2025 Strategic Case Study. And this is a report that has been produced by the examiner themselves. So the examiner at CIMA is the person responsible for ultimately setting the marking schemes and the grading and the scaled scoring, and also reviewing the exams and the variants that the learners are sitting. So it's very, very important that you do take a look at the Strategic Case Study Examiner's Report, particularly if you are going to be sitting your Strategic Case Study exam soon, as it is full of helpful information that the examiner themselves has published. So what they want to see more of, what they want to see less of, what the good students did, what the poorer students did. Because you, of course, want to pass this exam. And so taking on board the feedback from the examiner is going to help you out. And I'll tell you exactly why. Well, it's going to help you out because it's going to provide you with information about the actual mistakes that students are constantly making in the exam. And I've looked at dozens of these reports. I've been working on the Strategic Case Study exam for many years, and it's the same sorts of mistakes that come up time and time again. And these are things that we're going to cover in this video. It's things like not knowing the theory. It's things like not applying the case effectively enough. It's not providing recommendations. It's not truly answering the question that has been asked. And these are things that the examiner has picked up on time and time again and mentioned in their report. It will also provide you with insights into what they want to see. So how they are building their mark schemes, how they are assessing learner scripts, and giving you some insight into how they do that so you can make sure that you are one of the learners that is providing those level 3 answers, those answers that are going to pass your exam. Because of course that's very, very important. And we've summarized that in some practical lessons in this video to give you some actionable advice to take your answers forward. So when you are undertaking your mock exams or your test papers or anything that you're doing in preparation for the exam, how you can take the lessons from the examiner's reports and apply it to your revision, apply it to your mock exams. That's what we're going to cover in this video. So let's start. And we'll start by looking at where candidates excelled. So if you are taking the exam that's coming up shortly, you need to be looking at where previous candidates excelled, because you want to be one of those. So looking at the areas that they did well in and making sure you do well in them as well. And of course, conversely, looking at where the poor candidates, what they did, and making sure you don't do that. So where did candidates excel in May and August? Well, they excelled in certain technical areas. In things such as applying the suitability, acceptability, feasibility framework, the CIMA ethical code. So that's the various different steps in the ethical code, or the various different principles in the ethical code, such as integrity, objectivity, etc. In being able to mitigate risks, so identifying risks and providing suitable mitigation steps. Now that's incredibly important because that is something that is part of the role that you have in this case study. It's specifically mentioned in the preamble provided by CIMA, is to be able to mitigate risks. Also, currency risks is where students excelled, so knowing how to mitigate currency risk. And that's going to be very important for the upcoming case as well, because it is a company that operates in multiple different countries. It is a company that sells its products to lots of different countries all around the world. And so currency risk is going to be relevant here. Also in non-financial capital value. So students that understood the value of reputation and goodwill and patents and general engineering technology and knowledge and skills within the organization was very important. That's where candidates excelled. And again, that is exactly relevant to this case as well. The previous one was about satellites. The new one is about electric vehicles. So very, very high levels of engineering technology is very, very important here. And what the examiner specifically said separated the top scripts from the poorer scripts was not only this technical accuracy, which is incredibly important, but the application of that knowledge as well. So it's not just enough to know about risk mitigation or to know what currency risk is. It's about specifically applying it, not just to the case, but the specific question in the context of the case. So not just about what risks are affecting cumulator, but what specific risks are affecting cumulator in the specific scenario given to you in the unseen exam. And the strongest answers use the pre-seen, the unseen, and the reference material to answer the exact question asked, providing clear recommendations, conclusions, and justifications for that. So if you were to, in a sense, extract a template and a formula for a great answer in your exam, it would be just that. Referencing the pre-seen, answering the specific question asked with reference to the reference material and the unseen itself in the context of the case, providing clear justifications. But where were some of the common technical weaknesses? So of course, theory still being important, even though it's not necessarily a theoretical exam. You've already done that in your FLP or in your OTQs for E3, P3, F3, etc. But common technical weaknesses that learners had, so you need to make sure you don't have these weaknesses, were things such as market efficiency, not understanding market efficiency theory. So understanding that share prices are based on multiple different factors and understanding that not every market is absolutely perfect. It's not going to be a complete representation of everything. It's only a representation of the knowledge that is known in the public market. Of course, they don't know the trade secrets that are going on inside cumulator, and of course if it did, that would be insider trading. But also things like share price signals, understanding what a beta factor is and how it is a representation of the risk of a certain share price against the market, or how much it fluctuates against the market itself. So if the market is, as a baseline, a beta of 1, anything that has a beta of 1 is going to be pretty much exactly the same as the market. If the market goes up 10%, you'd expect your share price to go up 10%, etc. Whereas if you've got a very high beta, say a beta of 2, that means it's going to be double the effect of anything that happens in the market. And so it's very important to understand that. It's also important to understand that a share price is not directly correlated to performance on any given day. And the examiner specifically mentioned this because certain people had been assuming in their exam, not saying you would do this is just what the examiner has done, that say a 20% increase in revenue or a 10% increase in revenue is going to lead to a 10 or 20% increase in the share price, which of course that is not what it is. So understanding share price signals is very important. Also, understanding governance, the importance of governance, the setting of the tone across the organization is very, very important. And understanding the impact it has on the rest of your organization, the rest of your operations is important. And one thing they specifically mentioned here was understanding director independence. The importance of the non-executive directors, the role that the non-executive directors play within the organization is very important. They have to be separate, they have to be independent. The clue is in the name. And so, for example, one of the things that they said was that Leofair, so the satellite company in the previous pre-scene, was purchasing another company. And lots of people had been recommending that directors at this company that they were purchasing be awarded non-executive director positions on the Leofair board. Now, of course, that goes completely against independence. They're not an independent director if they're also an executive director of one of the companies within your subsidiary. So that is a clear breach of independence. So making sure you understand that distinction is very, very important. Also, one thing the examiner said was there was poor stakeholder analysis with an oversimplification of what stakeholder power was, and that it was based purely on financial value. Oh, this was our biggest supplier, so therefore they are a really important shareholder. Or this bank we owe a certain amount of money to, so they are a very, very important stakeholder. Whereas actually it can be so much more than that. So, for example, if we think about with Cumulator, we are a company that relies on our various different dealerships. Those are going to be very important relationships. We also need to think about our suppliers. So lithium producers, we may have smaller lithium producers that we get our lithium from compared to the big ones, but that doesn't necessarily mean they are not important because lithium is an incredibly rare substance. And so even a small lithium provider is going to be very important to our company, to our operations. And anything that affects our reputation is going to be important. So the local communities, they may not have a financial value, but if we negatively affect our local communities, which is something we said that we wouldn't do, then that's going to be important for us as well, because that would go against our values. So stakeholders are not just important because they are worth money. There are other factors at play. So it's very important to remember that. And also financial strategy. Lots of people in the previous exam were not understanding the organization's financial position. They were looking at financial strategy from a very generic perspective, looking at generic issues over equity and debt funding and those sorts of things without understanding the specific metrics of the business. Not understanding perhaps the current ratio or the gearing ratio and the solvency, the interest cover, the cash at hand, the working capital requirements of the specific organization. That's very important. You are someone working in the finance function at this company, not just you are a generic finance manager working in company X, any company, just make up the figures. So be very specific in your application, in your analysis, to the case you are working on. So, how do we ensure that we are not one of these students that is making these common mistakes? So, one of the first things to make sure you do, and how to take this video, take the learnings from this video and take it forward, is to ensure you have that core knowledge. So make sure you have a complete knowledge base. Make sure you can cover all those core activities, because the questions in the unseen exam, regardless of which variant you get, will come from a selection of those 5 core activities. And so what I recommend you do is go find the CIMA blueprint, where it has all those core activities and all the I can statements that come under each of those core activities, and look through them as a checklist and think to yourself, can you do that? Because if you're looking at those I can statements and realizing I can't do that, then you are going to struggle should that come up in the exam. So that would be your next step, is to plug those gaps. Don't just rely on the studies that you did for E3 5 months ago. Go and refresh your memory. Go and look at those I can statements and think, I can't do this, so I need to revise that. And make sure that you know those topics, but not just know them from a textbook perspective, but know how to apply them. Not just you know the definition, but you know how to use them in a real world scenario. That's going to prevent you from falling into this trap where you can only regurgitate the theory. And that will allow you to move beyond those level 1 answers into those upper level 2 and level 3 answers, which are necessary in order to get your pass. The next tip is to answer the actual question. Now, you might be looking at that and listening to me and thinking, well, what do you mean answer the question? Of course I'm going to answer the question. I'm not going to make up a question and answer it. Of course I'm going to read the question and answer it. But you'd be amazed at how many people don't do that. They pick specific parts of the requirement line and run with it. And they end up answering the question they wish they had got, or the one they want to have gotten, rather than the actual question. So always make sure you understand the actual question being asked, and you might need to then refer back to the rest of the unseen material to pinpoint what it is that you are looking for. Check that there are every part of the question and every part of the subtasks are being specifically answered, because sometimes there will be a couple of requirements hidden in one sentence. And also remember that you need to answer that specific question in the context of the company. Don't just see some keywords and think, I can remember loads of theoretical material about that particular topic, I'm going to start writing that. Because that is not what you were going to be tested on in this exam. You're not going to be tested on your theory knowledge from a purely do you know the theory perspective. It's about how you can use that information to answer specific questions in a specific scenario. So don't fall into that trap that some students do, where they answer the question they want rather than the one set. So for example, I've had many of this in my time as a tutor. So for example, a student will be given an appraisal of a potential project or an acquisition or something like that, and you'll be asked to evaluate the project. And they'll see that one of the things that have been provided is a full investment appraisal, net present value, IRR, etc., and to discuss it. And they'll see, oh, investment appraisal. Oh, I know about investment appraisal. I can write about that. I'll start by talking all the different investment appraisals. There's IRR and modified IRR and payback periods and NPVs, and here are the advantages and disadvantages of each and where certain companies would use them, etc. That is not what you are going to be asked. That is choosing to see a shiny object, so to speak, the topic term that you want to talk about, and running with it and just saying, I'm going to tell you everything I know about investment appraisal, rather than talking about this specific investment in this specific context. So here's an example of this. So let's say you've got a question in your exam and it's analyze the roles of the key stakeholders in Cumulus' internal control process and how risk management fits within the 3 lines of defense. So again, you might easily pick out, oh, we're talking about stakeholders here. I'll talk about stakeholders, talk about Mendelow's matrix. Oh, internal control. I'll talk about controls. I'll talk about audits, etc. Or risk management. I'll go through every single part of the COSO risk methodology because it's about risk methodology and management, etc. Again, no, that is not what the question is asked. And also, we need to make sure that you are specifically breaking down that task. It's about key stakeholders in the control process and how risk management fits within the 3 lines of defense, operational and risk management and internal audit, those sorts of things. So it's not just about finding certain words or just merging that whole requirement into one topic that you think it's asking about. It's about specifically picking out key lines, key points, and answering exactly that. Specifically answering how we analyze the roles, or to analyze the roles of the key stakeholders in the control process. Then analyze how risk management fits within the 3 lines of defense. So that will help you to ensure you are specifically answering the question asked, not the question you wished you had or the question you want to have gotten. The next tip is to make sure you apply your knowledge to the scenario. Again, it's not about regurgitating the theory. It's not about, well, I remember this at F3. I'm going to talk about everything I know about this topic. It's about actually answering the question in this context. The context of being a financial manager working in the finance function at Cumulator. Because that is how you're going to earn your marks here. They are testing your business acumen. They are testing your ability to apply the information, to use the background context you've already been given in the pre-seen, to use the specific data given to you in the unseen, to be able to take those numbers, to take those facts and figures, and to help construct a comprehensive answer. Because 2 things that students often do is they reproduce theory in a pure textbook fashion. Again, they just look at it and say, oh, this is about investment appraisal. I'm going to start talking about what investment appraisal is, rather than talking about the specific investment that they're being asked to analyze in the case. or they write everything they know about a specific issue. Again, thinking about investment appraisal, talking about all the different types of it, talking about the advantages and the disadvantages of it, rather than focusing on the specific requirement. Because that's going to earn them few marks. Because that is not what the question is going to be. The question is going to be around your ability to answer the question, to apply the knowledge in the specific context. So to summarize that, do not write essays. You are not being asked to write a theoretical essay. It is not a theory test. You need to be weaving your application, your analysis to the specific case and the specific requirement in every point that you make. And if you do that, you're going to score high marks. So to give you an example of applying knowledge in an effective way where you're still using the theory, of course, theoretical knowledge is important. We already said that plugging gaps in your theoretical knowledge was one of the important tips that you need to take away ahead of your exam. But how you use it, how you apply it is important. So let's look at this. So Ansoff developed a model to help understand the risk of new strategies. According to the matrix, this strategy would be a new market and new service category, which he categorized as high risk due to the lack of knowledge. I would agree with this assessment in our case. Whilst we are experts in the car and battery manufacturing industry, we are not experts in lithium recycling and the impact on its reuse. So we would need to obtain this knowledge. We would also face new competitors already offering such services, which may make progress in the market difficult. So again, we are using theory. We are using Ansoff's matrix. We are talking about the matrix. We are talking about the different categories where something is a new market, new service category, and therefore is going to be high risk. But what you can see is we are using that knowledge to answer the question. We are taking the bits of that theory that are relevant to us, that means it's going to be high risk, and we're applying it to the question that has been asked. What we are not doing is saying Ansoff's matrix is a matrix which looks at quantifying different strategies and the risk levels of them. At the top, you have your services or your products. At the y-axis, you have whether it's a new or existing market. When something is an existing market, existing product, this is low risk. When something is a new market but existing product, it is a market development strategy. Common disadvantages of market development strategies or examples of market development strategies are X, Y, Z. We're not doing that. We're not running with it to just tell everything we know about Ansoff's matrix. We are specifically extracting the key bits of information we need to produce an effective point that is applied and analyzed in the context of the question. Another tip for you, and again, this is a direct one from the examiner's report. The examiner specifically said that they want learners to provide these effective recommendations. The examiner specifically reminds learners that this is a senior level qualification. This is the final exam before you are a CIMA qualified accountant. You are going to be a senior manager. You're going to be reporting to the board of directors. You need to be influential. You need to be able to get your point across and make decisions and say, I think we should do X, Y, Z because of ABC. It's not here's the raw data, make something of it. You are supposed to be making recommendations. So make sure you are explaining and justifying and concluding and providing recommendation. So make sure that you turn your statements into explanations. So how, why, we should do this because. Explaining the how we're going to do this, explaining the why we should do this, because that's being influential, using the data to support it. So, for example, if you're talking about CIMA ethical principles, you're talking about how certain actions breaches principles and how we should react to it. Make sure that you're explaining how these principles are being breached by the specific facts in the scenario and what we need to do about it. Not just saying, here are the CIMA ethical principles: integrity, objectivity, professional competence, and due care. Here are examples of each of these. You, again, are explaining the facts of the case using the theory to back it up, and then explaining your how, explaining your why. Another thing you could do is use words like since and because. So this will then force you to back it up. We should do X, Y, Z because, and then you have to think, well, why should we do X, Y, Z? Oh, well, we'll look at the facts of the case. We'll look at Cumulator's financial position. We'll look at Cumulator's goals and mission, etc., and the history of the company. We'll look at their current position within the market, etc. And then you will then be able to justify why you are saying what you are saying. So very, very important to use words like that. And this is a direct quote from the examiner's report as well, to prove to you the importance of these explanations, to prove to you the importance of these justifications, that high-level marks, so the marks you want to get, the level 3 answers, require clear expectations, explanations, and justifications. Not single-line points, not single bare identifications of points. You have to build on your points. You have to explain and justify your points. So again, to give an example, this is one that we've taken from our mocks here. So the current projections reveal a return of an NPV of $780 million, which suggests a launch would be worth undertaking. However, since, remember that term, since this product is outside our usual remit, we must recalculate a risk-adjusted rate to confirm that the net present value is still positive before continuing the project. So we're saying that, okay, on the face of it, this looks good, but however, when we apply it to our specific situation, we understand, we realize this is outside our remit, and therefore have to take an additional action to ensure it is still in our best interests. While we do not have expertise in this area, we do have expertise in the electric vehicle industry and a brand name that reflects this. Because, again, remember that term, because of the fact that we make this purchase a going concern, and with the increased need in this market and the government incentives, this would appear to be a good time to enter this new area. So again, you're backing it up with specifics about our situation. We're not just saying it looks like a good idea, but we're saying it's a good idea because we have expertise, because it's going to be a going concern, and therefore we're going to take advantage of the purchase company's expertise. Because there is a need in this market, because the government is offering incentives that will help us with our tax bill. You are using the facts of the case, the facts of the scenario, to explain and justify why it is a good idea. That's the key difference. That's the key distinction between a good answer and a poor answer. And the next tip is to make sure you know the pre-scene. To make sure you study the pre-scene in depth. Make sure you know the business. Everything that I've talked about so far is based on the fact that we already know the ins and outs of Cumulator. So we can answer questions from Cumulator's perspective. And so the first step there is to make sure you study the pre-scene in depth, to make sure you know the business, because this, A, helps you to answer the questions in a way that's going to earn you marks, as I've already discussed, but it also helps you save time. You are given a blank copy of the pre-scene in your exam, but opening this up and scrolling through it takes an awful lot of time that you do not have, because it is a very, very time-sensitive exam. Also, make sure that you build industry awareness. So make sure that you take a look at actual companies in the same position in the real world. What sorts of things are they doing at the moment? What sorts of problems have they had? So looking at things like BYD, Tesla, etc. What are they doing at the moment? What is good about them? What's bad about them? What challenges have they faced? Because that is going to help you answer questions. What sorts of government incentives have been awarded to electric vehicle companies recently? What sorts of new rules and regulations regarding sustainability have passed recently? Again, going to help you answer questions in the exam. It also helps you to apply the information naturally. Rather than trying to force it, rather than trying to look back through the pre-scene and find specific quotes to then put in, which looks very much like you've just brought up a reference for the sake of it, the more natural familiarity you have with the situation, with the case, with the company, the easier it's going to be to naturally answer questions, which is exactly what a real senior finance manager in this company would do. If you were talking about these if you were answering these questions about your own organization, the company you actually work for in real life, you would already have that familiarity. You would talk about it, based on what we did last year, based on our results, based on our values. It's always important to us to do X, Y, Z. You wouldn't be talking about your company like, our company is X, Y, Z. Our company has a long and rich history of X, Y, Z, and A, B, C, and therefore, when our company is doing something, it should consider this. You wouldn't talk like that. You're not a third party. You're talking about it like someone working at the organization naturally. Another tip here is to practice as much as possible under real exam conditions and mark your own papers or get it marked if possible as well. For many reasons. One, this builds exam muscle memory. So thinking about how you approach the actual questions, your flow of approaching the questions, of identifying the requirements, of building your plan, brainstorming your ideas, applying the reference material, build that memory as well. And do it under exam conditions, because anything that you don't do under exam conditions is just an exercise rather than an actual mock or anything like that. Because if you're not going to do it within time constraints, if you're not going to do it closed book, then that's not really reflective of what you're going to experience on the exam day, and therefore is not going to necessarily help you. So practice as many mock exams as you can and check against the model answers, and potentially even get external feedback as well, either from tuition providers such as Astranti, or if you've got a colleague that's also undertaking this exam, swap scripts and mark each other's answers. And also just worth noting as well that even if you don't get your mocks marked by Astranti, we also have a complete debrief video that goes through each mock exam as well. So that can help you to review the process of planning that particular mock and also the solution. Also, focus on specific areas during your practice as well, such as your ability to answer every single subtask and every element of each subtask. Have you identified it? Have you planned your time effectively and managed your time effectively to cover all of this? Because nothing causes learners to fail this exam more than poor exam technique and not answering every single question. So make sure you can get through all of the requirements in the required time. Also, test yourself on your ability to reference information, to reference the industry, to reference the reference, to reference the pre-scene, apply the pre-scene, apply the unseen, apply the reference, apply the industry. Look through your answers. If you're looking through an answer that you've given and you've realized that you've not actually used any statistics from the pre-scene, you've not really referenced anything to do with the reference material or the unseen, then maybe you need to go back and try again and make sure that you are doing that going forward. And also make sure you're providing effective explanations and applications. So if it's talking about theory and referencing theory, you're referencing the theory, you're referencing the specific part of the theory that's important here and why it's important here. You're not just providing a list of theories and thinking that that is enough. Saying, oh, well, you should look at the environment. Tools like this could be Pestel, SWOT, 5 forces, ANSOFs. Just listing those theories out like that is not going to do anything. It's not going to award you any marks. And the next tip, and again, this is something that the examiner has specifically said, and as said, that students that plan effectively end up doing well, students that don't plan end up waffling, they end up going off track, they end up not answering the question asked. And from our experience as well as a tuition provider, the number one cause of students failing this exam is not planning correctly. So when you plan your answers, structure them. Structure them by the task. Structure them with clear headings. Write short paragraphs under each heading. Essentially turn your plan into your answer. Plan directly into your answer box. Make a plan and turn each of those points on your plan into a point and earn marks. Again, this is something the examiner has said, in that when the scripts are messy, when they are huge blocks of text and all the points are merging together, then it causes confusion. The markers don't have the time to really try and dissect every single thing that you have written here. So a suggestion from this is to make sure that you don't have blurred points with no organization. Make sure you don't have a long unstructured paragraph. Make sure you put it as point A, answer A, point B, answer B, point C, answer C, etc. Don't merge it all together where you start point A and then you start point C and then you finish point A and you start point B and then you finish point B and you finish point C, and it's all mixed up, because it's supposed to be essentially representative of something you would actually be willing to provide to a senior manager or director in an organization. So, of course, you need it to be clear and concise and focused, not a big mismatch of loads of information that just doesn't make sense. So, key point here, when you're planning, jot your headings and your short points, and then just expand on them when you're actually writing your answer. The actual writing of your answer should just be expanding on your plan. If you've got a completely different end result from what your plan was, then you didn't plan correctly. And again, here is an example of a clear plan. So let's say that your task was to provide an evaluation of the validity of this proposed project for Cumulator on the assumption we use our usual cost of capital. Now, of course, you could write a huge plan for this. I've just got a few summarized points here to demonstrate that. So you might start by talking about the benefits of this, the diversification of revenue, and this is going to then help reduce dependency on existing operations. It mitigates risks with some of our suppliers, etc. There's also the long-term benefits of it from a value standpoint, a sustainability standpoint, but then of course it's going to be expensive, it could be very difficult to implement, it could expose us to new risks, the standard cost of capital might be inappropriate for a project outside of our standard remit, and then you conclude it all. Now, of course, that you would build a longer plan than that if you were actually answering this question, but just to give you an example of how you can start breaking down the benefits. And also it just makes it such an easier question to answer then. Rather than looking down the barrel of a 20-mark question that is just a sentence, you then suddenly have, oh, let's just write 1 mark about this and 1 mark about that and 1 mark about A, B, C, D, E. And all of a sudden you've broken it down into loads of small bite-sized chunks, and it becomes so much easier to answer as well. And another importance of planning your answer is you can make sure that all of this is going back to this idea of the viability and suitability. So again, it goes back to what we said earlier. One of the first tips was making sure we've read the question that's been asked. We can then make sure our plan is tying back to our requirement line to make sure we are answering the question that has been asked. So in summary then, what are your key takeaways from this video? Remember, this video has been based on the examiner's reports and key points that the examiner has mentioned. And why would you not want to apply those? Why would you not want to take the point that the person that sets the exam, that marks the exam or decides on the mark scheme of the exam, etc., why would you not take information they have given as to what they want students to do and what they don't want students to do, and take that forward into your exam? So think of this final page as a checklist of things that you need to do to ensure you are going to be able to successfully pass this exam. So your key success habits to pass this exam. Number 1, master the core knowledge. Go back, read through those blueprints, look at those I can statements, look where the gaps in your knowledge are, and make sure you plug those gaps. Make sure you are versed in answering the question asked. Make sure you test yourself on your ability to pick out the requirements, to identify the requirements, and make sure you are building your plans to answer that question. Not what you wanted to get, not what you hope that means, but exactly what it asks. Then make sure that you're always applying to the scenario. You're using the reference material. They've given it to you for a reason. It's called reference material for a reason. They expect you to reference it. And information from the pre-scene as well to help build your situational context and background to any question that you answer. Make sure that you are justifying, showing the how and the why, not just the what. Why you are suggesting this, how we should implement this, and so on. Because that then forces you to talk specifically about the company. It's not just how a company could implement this, but given our specific strategy, our specific financial situation, etc., how would we apply this? Make sure you know the business, make sure you know the industry as well, because that's just going to help make it so much easier for you to naturally talk about it from a real-world perspective. You'll be able to talk about Cumulator like someone that actually works at Cumulator far more easily. And make sure you practice as much as possible. Nothing is better preparation for this exam than practicing as much as possible. And ensuring that you plan your answers effectively and you turn your plans into effective answers as well. So you, again, this comes from practice. The more you practice, the better you're going to be. And remember that these are all things that not only we've been teaching for many years, but things that the examiner specifically has said, and not just last time, not just from the May and August one, but I can assure you has said time and time again. There are certain things in here, such as answering the question asked, that have been appearing in examiners' reports since 2016. They've been appearing time and time again because learners are still making the same mistakes over and over again. But hopefully, by watching this video, by looking at that examiner's report, which you can find online, you will not be one of them. You will know what the examiner wants. You will know how to provide those level 3 answers to make sure you are doing what the examiner wants, and therefore you will be passing this exam when you sit it. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this video. More importantly, I hope you have found it useful. I hope you now have a few key tips to take away and apply to your revision and apply to your exam. If you have enjoyed this video and you want more exam advice and more guidance around the SCS, then please do like and subscribe. We're going to be posting more content around the exam, and also check out our website, www.astranti.com. We've got more information about the strategic case study exam and lots of high quality products about the case study exam to help you get that pass that you want. So do check us out. And thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again for more content that we're going to be putting out. And if I don't see you, then best of luck in your preparation and your exam, and hopefully in a few weeks' time you'll all be celebrating a pass. So thanks and goodbye.